So hello everybody, my name is Adam Benslama, and today I'll be talking about my project Sweet Mirage. So I just first like to thank thanking the judges and organizers for giving me the opportunity to be here, as well as Mr. Eastburn and Ms. Bajaj from Princeton High School for their support. So when you see this image, I think the first thing that catches your eyes are these floating boats that are here. Now, these boats aren't floating yet. This is a documented optical illusion called the Fata Morgana, coming from the impression of floating fairy castles. So this illusion basically occurs because let's say we have a very hot summer day with a cool body of water on the bottom. What's going to happen is that we know that air heats up way faster than water does. So we're going to have a way hotter air above the surface of water. What's going to happen then is that the water is going to cool the air, and that depending on how close that body of air is to the water or not at a specific height, it's going to cool more or less. So what we have is the higher we go, the higher the temperature. The temperature of this medium actually is going to depend on its height. So what that does is the temperature has this effect on a very specific property of air known as the refractive index, which actually models how fast light travels in that medium. And we know that when light goes from traveling at one speed in one medium to a different speed in another medium, the light is going to slightly deviate in its trajectory. So once we have a continuously varying refractive index for height, we're going to have the light that might be going, let's say, upwards from the boat that would actually curve down into your eye. Now, the interesting part about this mirage is that the human eye can only perceive the last point of the trajectory of light. It can't actually trace it back to see the whole thing. So once you have light that at the last point, it's sloping downwards, you have actually the impression that you have a boat that is not right in front of you, but higher above you. More specifically, the boat is going to be displaced and shrunk up in the image you see. This is the optical illusion that I studied in my project. So what I had to find a way to do now was replicate this effect at a smaller smaller scale in my bedroom, as I did not have a sea at that time. So another effect that produces a similar refractive index change, actually modeled identically mathematically, is concentration of sugar in water. The concentration of sugar in water, the way that it disperses, is modeled the same way as the way that heat disperses in air. So my experiment actually was it was conducted by using a layer of sugar on the bottom of a tank of water such that the mass of the sugar, its concentration diffused upwards, so that we had somewhat of a gradient, such that if we go upwards, the refractive index decreases, just like how we had in the Fata Morgana effect. So here's a quick flash of some materials I used to conduct my experiments. Just notably, I used sugar and some other household disposals to be able to conduct my experiment and take measurements. So what my experiment really consisted in doing was first taking a picture of the trajectory of light, because as we know, the way we see an object depends on how light coming from that object goes into our eyes. So being able to understand the way that light moves in this medium is key to making mathematical predictions as to how much the object would be distorted or where it would be placed. Then, of course, I took a picture of the object through the container just to see what we would see if that was what the mirage is going on. And then I took a control picture of the object with no effects. As we can see, it's a green object I highlighted here. So here, I needed to make sure that inside of my container, I did indeed have the same thing going on as during a Fata Morgana. And this is just a measurement of a refractive index that I took as a function of height in the container. And as we see, it is decreasing as height is increasing, just like in the real mirage. We also see that the slope at which it's decreasing depends on the initial height. So now if we look at some pictures that I took through this medium, we have the control picture of the object that's quite distinguishable. And in the middle, the picture of the object through the medium. As we see, the object is pushed up and then shrunk down. If you compare this to an image during a real Fata Morgana, we see basically the same effect going on. Another key point of this study was that we had to mathematically predict what the trajectory of light was, because if we could predict that, we could look at the angles and determine by how much the object was distorted. So here in this graph, you see an experimental curve that I just highlighted in red on the picture I took, and the blue theoretical prediction that I used with my model. As we see, there's a good enough agreement. This study is important because it can be used to model other phenomena that are due to atmospheric refraction. One of the most notable ones is rainbows with their size and placement in the sky. But another thing that uses a very similar effect is the fact that the angular size of the moon actually depends on its height in the sky. This is due to a similar atmospheric refraction phenomenon. I'd like to thank all of you for your attention.